Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Bobby Sylvester, back after missing a couple shows, and I'm joined, as always, by Mike Tagliere. Tags, I know you and Andy were poking fun at me last show about being out, but I'm pretty sure you guys were both just jealous that I get to draft Saquon Barkley next week in the Experts Dynasty League.
Yeah, that might be the case, but it's good to have you back. I mean, it's like, you know, when Rank was on and he started ragging on you, and then Barron's came on, it was like, all right, everybody's ragging on Bobby, and of course I got to play into that. But at the same time, I mean, it's never going to end, though. You know that. Like, if you miss a show, that's happening every single time.
It's all right, man. I was busy and everything, and, you know, it's all right. I missed you guys. I really wish I could have been there. I had some hot takes. My child was sick, so I wasn't able to make it for that one. So, sorry I wasn't there, everyone. Looking forward to this show, though, and we've got a great guest on. We're not riding solo. We're joined by Matt Harmon of NFL.com, creator of Reception Perception, which is perfect because we're going to be chatting about our rookie wide receiver dynasty rankings. You can follow Matt on Twitter at MattHarmon_BYB. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. I'm happy to be back when you're back, Bobby. It's always good to talk to you, and it's always good to talk to Tags. I'm excited about today's show. You know, it's so much better to me to be able to kind of like, now that the draft is over, really be able to assess where these guys fit, because I find that to be such a more helpful discussion. So I'm excited about the show today.
So, Matt, before the show, Tags was telling me he was looking over the roster on NFL.com, you know, David Carr, Maurice Jones-Drew, Nate Burleson, and of course you. He thinks if our staff played your staff in flag football, that we'd blow you guys out. In fact, Tags volunteered to cover Burleson on an island all by himself.
I did no such thing. I'm just going to go ahead and state this right now. I said no such thing. Bobby's feeling good because we won our company flag football championship, I guess you can call it that, from our central team. And I don't know, man. I don't move the way I used to.
We didn't just win that. We scored on every single play. They did not stop us once. Not one play.
When Nate Burleson and Maurice Jones-Drew are on the opposing team, I mean, I don't care if they're retired or not. They're going to spank us.
Yeah, I was going to say,
no doubt about it, man.
That's the worst take I've ever heard.
Well, Tag said it. Tag's the one that said it. He's no denying it now. But
I love you, Tags, and you know I've met you in person. We're good pals. I don't see any universe in which you're covering Burleson one-on-one. Maybe even if there was three of you, I don't even know if that would be enough. He's absolutely Nate is still in good shape. But now, like, if we're talking you guys playing like maybe our fantasy department, excluding Akbar, because I mean he's a physical freak show. We'll throw him out.
We saw his pitch at the Phillies game. That was pathetic.
Let me tell you. I don't want to get into that with Akbar, but I'm pretty sure that I think he faked that. I think he faked it, and if he did, that's awesome. That's brilliant. Yeah, the theme around the office is that he faked it for, you know, because he blew up. Like, you know, I'm sure that that's a possibility. But anyways, if it was like you guys versus like maybe just our fantasy staff, maybe that's a conversation, because I mean
we need to do that for sure. And I'll just say this: Tags didn't actually say that. I was just getting back at him for last show for ragging on me, and I'm only saying this. I could have let it fly, but I'm only saying this so you don't think like Tags is some idiot who thinks he can cover Nate Burleson.
No, I don't think he's that big headed. But I think you guys, I mean, I don't know who else you guys be bringing to the table, but like I'm confident in myself and like a few of the other guys, but we need to
do it.
We got some real weenies on our side. I mean, like James, Fabiano, those guys are gonna get schooled. So yeah, like that. Let me just tell you that. I think Rank is in good shape, and Marcus lifts, and Gelhar's a runner. So we've got some people that could bring something to the table, but I'm not confident in us overall.
That sounds awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun there. So we did have some news that come out. We're going to jump over to the wide receiver dynasty rankings in a minute, but one wide receiver we need to talk about first is Chris Godwin. Tags and I were both very excited about this news that he's going to be starting for the Bucs. I think he's ultra talented. Matt, how do you feel about Godwin this year?
Oh, man. I mean, I love Chris Godwin as a player. He was my favorite receiver from last year's draft class. His reception perception profile was great. I called him the most underrated receiver in the class before the scouting combine last year. So I'm really excited about this news, especially because he started kind of popping at the end of the year, too. I haven't gone back and charted his sample for reception perception yet, because the fantasy footballers don't have him in their top 50. So he'll be somebody I get to at some point over the summer. But again, really confident in the player. And this is great news. I kind of already expected him to be the starting Z in 3 wide receiver sets, with I think would be an optimal situation is they have Evans at the split end, the X receiver, then they have Godwin as the flanker, and then they have Deshaun Jackson as the slot receiver on the inside. And I think that's a great setup. Maybe maybe Deshaun Jackson ends up taking more snaps than him, but I do think Godwin is primed to break out, at least from an individual sense. The problem is it's tough to like carve out the amount of targets he's going to need to be a true like reliable fantasy player, because it's kind of a crowded house in Tampa Bay.
Yeah. And they've got the 2 good tight ends as well. I will be having all the shares of Jameis Winston.
Yeah, Jameis Winston's one of the most undervalued quarterbacks early on in fantasy football. Like, I actually wrote an article, and it's going to be on the site tomorrow. We're going to be I'm talking about late round best ball targets, and Jameis Winston is probably my favorite QB2 in best ball leagues right now. Everybody's talking about, where are we going to find this value? Is it going to be Mike Evans? Is it going to be Ronald Jones? Is it going to be one of the tight ends? All these things add up to Jameis Winston. And Jameis Winston, Andy and I talked in the last show, and the fact that Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick, if you merge them into one quarterback, they would have led the NFL in passing yardage, which is really impressive.
It's
so,
crazy.
When the touchdowns start coming from Mike Evans, from O.J. Howard, from Cameron Brate, these things are going to be there. And Matt, I'm really, it's funny because we had you on the show last year, and I remember you talking about Chris Godwin. I was a fan of him as well. I didn't have him as my number 1 receiver, but we talked about him, and he reminded me a lot of Pierre Garçon, watching him in college, like a younger version, maybe a little bit bigger than Garçon too. And so when I heard the news that he's going to be in the starting lineup now, it made me believe that they're going to put him in the slot. They're going to kind of take Humphries out of the picture, and they're going to line him up in the slot, whereas Deshaun Jackson and Mike Evans would be on the perimeter. I do believe that there's going to be some mix and match, because that's how you create mismatches in the NFL. Someone please tell the Cowboys that, or the Falcons. That would be good. But, that's the thing with Godwin. It's good to know that, I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of how often the Bucs ran 3 wide receiver sets, but I would imagine it's relatively high.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for positional versatility there with the Bucs offense, because they, like Bobby mentioned, they have these 2 tight ends, one of which, O.J. Howard, is kind of your more traditional inline tight end, and then Cameron Brate is more of that move guy. So you can do a lot of things with them too. Humphries, I think, is like a nice guy to have around, but probably can be, a marginalized figure in the offense. And Godwin, I agree with you, Mike. I think he can play inside from the slot. If you've been following me at all this offseason, like I'm obsessing over targeting players from the slot as like traditional number 1 receivers from the slot, or like these guys like Juju Smith-Schuster or Cooper Kupp or Nelson Aguilar, who really saw a boost from playing that interior role. And I think Godwin could thrive in that, but I also think he is much more of a player that can like defeat top tier press man coverage on the outside, maybe more than Jackson at this point in his career. And just for me, like if it was my call, I would throw him at the Z receiver position, the traditional flanker, and have Jackson kind of maximize his speed and versatility from the slot. But who knows? We'll see what happens. But the good news is I think that no matter what, he can play either one of those positions.
I think Godwin can play wherever he wants, and they rave about his intangibles as well, his work ethic, his knowledge of the game. I'm just excited to see how good this kid can be, and I'm going to be drafting him a lot. I don't know if I'm as high on tags as him, so I probably won't get him in all my leagues, but I'm a pretty big fan.
Yeah, 62%. I just looked it up while we were talking here. 62% is the percentage that Tampa Bay runs 3 wide receiver sets. So it's towards the upper echelon. It's not like the top where it's like, the Rams are doing it 81% of the time. So it's more of like the top third of the league. So they do run it quite often. But yeah, this lowers the chance that they do start him in 2 wide receiver sets, that lowers Deshaun Jackson on my board a little bit, but I can't put Chris Godwin in my top 50 wide receivers just yet. Even with this news, I still think that he's just outside that range.
Yeah, that's where I've got him too. All right, guys, let's jump on over into it. Matt, is your top rookie wide receiver for Dynasty Leagues DJ Moore or Calvin Ridley?
I think I said before we started recording that I haven't really like officially ranked these guys, but in my head, if I was, in my own dynasty leagues and I haven't had a chance yet to have a rookie draft where I had a 1st round pick, I would say that the top wide receiver I'd be targeting is DJ Moore.
We're going to fight.
Oh, all right.
We're gonna fight.
That's fair.
All right, I've got Ridley a little bit higher too. Tags, like, where do you have him compared to all these running backs? I've got Michelle ahead of him, guys ahead of him, obviously Barkley, and then I've got Ridley number 4.
I have Ridley at number 6. I have him behind Barkley, Michelle, Ronald Jones, and Darius Geis, and Rashad Penny. Those are the 5 running backs that are clear cut. Like, these are top talent. They're taking top 2 rounds. I know they're going to be there, and it really depends on roster construction too. Because when you have a roster full of running backs and you're looking for wide receivers to build for the future, I would understand taking Ridley over someone like that. But what you want to do in that situation is trade back, because Ridley, I think his ADP in rookie drafts right now is 110, whereas DJ Moore I think is 1.8, and it's flip-flop for me. Now, Matt, I'm curious as to why Moore is there for you. Now, the landing spot for me with DJ Moore, sure, he's going to walk into targets immediately, but I think people are kind of missing what Greg Olsen brought to this offense before Christian McCaffrey came. So not only is McCaffrey going to see, I don't know if he's going to see decreased targets, but if he keeps the same, we're going to lose targets from Devin Funchess. We're going to lose targets from DJ Moore. Curtis Samuel, he's someone they drafted to be a versatile weapon last year. So it's like all these weapons, and on top of that, you have Cam Newton, who's been a historically badly accurate quarterback. Like he's just not very accurate. DJ Moore is not the biggest wide receiver. So, I mean, I understand when some people talk about DJ Moore is like, if he had a better landing spot than Ridley, I guess I could understand it because he's very versatile. He can be used on the perimeter. He can play out of the slot, which is where I'd love to see him. Mm-hmm. But he's not going to play out of the slot for Carolina. I don't see that happening. So I'm concerned. Is there any concern about his landing spot? And why would you have him over Ridley knowing what we know?
Well, I think that actually this year is probably the most concerning for Moore in terms of his target projection, because like you mentioned, Greg Olsen, Christian McCaffrey, Devin Funchess, he could very easily be fourth on the pecking order this year. Although I do think it's like not out of the realm of possibility at all that he ends up out targeting Devin Funchess just because, all right. Yeah, that could certainly happen. I think Funchess is a pretty good player, but I think Moore is definitely going to be a better long-term receiver. And, I know that the Carolina staff just really loves him. Obviously they spent a first round pick, but like they were obsessed with him in the pre-draft process, everything like that. So I expect him to be the number one receiver as soon as 2019, Funchess on the last year of his contract. And then with Greg Olsen too, like you're absolutely right. He is a huge piece of this offense. Cam Newton loves throwing to him over the middle of the field. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey absorbed a ton of targets last year, but McCaffrey he'll be there long term, but Greg Olsen is also getting older. They did sign him to a contract extension, but he's had a foot injury, which can be reoccurring. They drafted a 4th round tight end this year as kind of a contingency plan. He's flirted with TV. So, I mean, Olsen could easily be, gone in a year or two. And so I honestly think that Moore is the favorite to be, a top 2 or 3 targeted player there very, very soon, if not next year. And I just like him much better as a player because I think he really is. I know you say Cam Newton's not an accurate quarterback, and he's definitely not a consistently accurate quarterback. There's no arguing that. But I do think he's been assigned some of the most difficult high degree of passes in the past several years. This past year we kind of saw
That's a great point.
We kind of saw it change a little bit, especially with McCaffrey being there, throwing to much more wide open windows, not just a bunch of slow lumbering receivers that don't separate really well. And I think DJ Moore is kind of the continuation of that. He was a perfect receiver that I called throughout the draft process, a guy who could create like layup throws for a quarterback. And I think if any quarterback really needs those, it's Cam Newton. So I think the fact that he's going to see a lot more high percentage targets, that's really a benefit to him. And I think they'll move him from flanker to slot to a little bit of X because I do think he does offer that versatility.
No, yeah, I can't disagree with you on the versatility. I actually viewed him like a Julian Edelman type receiver, and that's kind of how I've stuck with DJ Moore, and that's why I refuse to put him at number 1. And I understand why people like him. Again, when I'm drafting a receiver here, I'm just reaching for a ceiling. And Calvin Ridley, and I know some people have put the kibosh on it because Calvin Ridley was a 1st round player and Antonio Brown was a 6th round. We're not talking about draft position where they were drafted. Like, if anything, that actually helps Calvin Ridley in the fact that he's going to get opportunity because of where he was drafted. But when you look at the measurables and the fact that people are complaining about some of the things that he didn't do at the combine and, how he lacked some of the metrics that people want to see, I really don't care. And you're a route guy, Matt. You've watched Calvin Ridley on tape. You can sit there in amazement in what this kid can do in a route. Now, I understand he's not a big receiver. He's not going to be Julio Jones or AJ Green. That's not the type of player that Calvin Ridley's going to be, but he has game-changing speed at all different levels. Like, he can beat you deep, but his route running is going to beat you underneath as well. He can run the full route tree, as you know. And the thing is like, he's pro ready. Now, he is walking into an Atlanta offense where Julio Jones is there. He's not going anywhere.
For a couple games until he has another foot injury.
That's the thing. Julio hasn't been known to be the most healthy player, right? Mohamed Sanu is a player, but they've treated him as pretty much a slot receiver since he came to Atlanta. And the reason that I was like, my love for Calvin Ridley was confirmed. Obviously, we had Matt Baldwin on the show. I know you guys have ties together, but also Hall of Famers Steve Smith and Michael Irvin. Like, when you hear them talk about Calvin Ridley, they just gush. Reggie Wayne was another one that I heard, he was going on and on about Calvin Ridley and the ceiling that this kid has. And the fact that he's learning from Julio Jones, I don't think does anything but help him long term. So while I don't picture Calvin Ridley as like a top 40 guy this year, I do think if you're building for the future, I think his ceiling is absolutely ridiculous.
And you haven't even mentioned that Matt Ryan had one of the best seasons for a quarterback of all time just 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, he's walking into a great offense, and it's funny because it does seem like people are kind of down on that Atlanta landing spot, but I really did like this for Ridley because I think it's going to be a great position in terms of deployment. Like, yeah, he won't. If he had gone to Dallas or something, he probably would have walked into a much larger target share right away. But I think where he's going to line up in Atlanta is crucial, because my biggest question with Calvin Ridley is, I agree he is a great route runner and he's an easy separator, but I did wonder, it's because it's probably his weakest point in reception perception in terms of his route running was his just about average success rate versus press coverage, and I think that would only be an issue that would be exacerbated in the pros. But because of him landing in Atlanta, he's not going to see the top tier press cornerback on a route to route basis. That's obviously going to go to Julio Jones. And with Sanu being kind of a hybrid flanker slot, and I think Ridley's kind of the same way, as he could play a little bit of that Z position while also shifting inside. But that was the way like Stephon Diggs was used a lot last year, was a guy that was used as that flanker receiver. And I think that that's a perfect role for Calvin Ridley, because you can get him a free release from a lot of press coverage and really kind of take away and minimize what is probably his weakest point. So I actually really thought this was a great landing spot long term for his development. And, you know, even though it's not the greatest or like a right away fantasy impact, I thought it was a really good landing spot.
Absolutely.
You know, in terms of pure talent, I was one of the guys on DJ Moore, liking him more than Calvin Ridley, and Tex gave me a really hard time about it, but, you know, I love DJ Moore. I was so disappointed when I saw the landing spot, though. So Ridley's higher for me, and, you know, the reason I'm drafting him over some of these running backs who we know is a lock to get like 250 touches this season is because running backs' lifespan in the NFL is so much shorter, right? I mean, Calvin Ridley, he may be older, but he's going to play in the NFL longer than some of these guys, you know, whether it be Royce Freeman or Ronald Jones, whoever it may be. I like the safety of drafting a wide receiver that early, especially someone like Ridley who's so polished.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing, Bobby. I do want to chime in on this because I think you're right. In most years, I would probably say to draft Calvin Ridley as like the third player or fourth player off the board. And the reason I say that is because of talent standpoint and longevity of his career. But the reason that Calvin Ridley falls a little bit for me, and the reason that you should trade back if you want to grab Ridley in your rookie draft, is because people want results now. And I don't care if it's dynasty. People still want results. They want to see that player's value going up as the years go on. The problem this year is that we mentioned Julio Jones hasn't gone anywhere. Mohamed Sanu still on the roster. It's hard for Calvin Ridley to live up to the hype right now. And because of that, you're probably not going to see a value increase this offseason unless something happened with Julio Jones. So you can draft one of those running backs, see his value increase in his rookie year because he's going to get 200 plus touches. And then in the offseason, that's when you go and trade for someone like Calvin Ridley because you're going to get value that you wouldn't have gotten, you know, here in this rookie draft.
That's fair. Yeah, and, you know, we like to knock Julio for being injury prone, but you look at what he's done the last 4 years. He's missed 3 games total. That's it.
Yeah.
He's always seems to be nicked up. It's kind of like an Alshon Jeffrey thing, but when Julio's on the field, he's the alpha dog. Like, I don't care how good I think Calvin Ridley is. Julio Jones is one of the best receivers I've ever watched play the game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's always going to be the number 2 when Julio's on the field.
So I've been away from the football podcast lately, but I've been reading through the reviews that y'all have been sending our way. I just love them. Thank you for taking the time to do that. And because we appreciate it so much, we're giving away a signed Todd Gurley jersey to one of our listeners who sends in one of these. All you have to do, take a screenshot of your rating or review on iTunes, send it to us at contest@fantasypros.com, and we can do that signed Todd Gurley jersey giveaway thanks to pristineauction.com. They've got hundreds of daily auctions that end every day, and at much more affordable prices than you'd probably guess too. Everything is guaranteed authentic from only the most trusted sources. It's quick, free to register, you only pay when you win an item, and lastly, when you make a bid, please be sure to let them know that Fantasy Pros sent you. That way we can keep giving away these signed jerseys that they give to our listeners. Pristine Auction has something for everyone. I just saw a Jerome Bettis signed helmet today, and it looked awesome. Again, that's pristineauction.com, PRISTINE. All right, so I think it's pretty obvious everyone has one of Ridley, Moore as their number 1 and 2. Who do you have as number 3, though, Tex?
All right, so I have, based on landing spot, based on productivity now, like you have to factor in everything. It's Christian Kirk, and the reason I say that is because he fell into a situation where he's going to be learning from the best, Larry Fitzgerald. Before the draft, I understood why people were comparing him to Golden Tate, because I think he's built like Golden Tate. I think he's going to play a similar position, but his all-around game reminded me a little bit more of like Randall Cobb. I felt like he was a little more Randall Cobb-esque, and that's obviously a good thing as well, because Randall Cobb had some moments in the NFL, but being tied to Josh Rosen for a long long time, and I think that we can pretty much assume that Josh Rosen's going to be his quarterback throughout his entire first contract. That's a good thing. And the Cardinals have already talked about it. Wilkes came out and talked about the fact that even though people like myself viewed Kirk as a pretty much slot only wide receiver, that you really didn't want to put him at the flanker position. You didn't want to put him to X, but they're talking about getting him on the field because they think he's one of the most talented wide receivers in their team. That's always good, but at the same time, you have to play to a player's strengths. I don't know if Christian Kirk is good to beat NFL corners on the perimeter right now. But at the same time, he is eventually going to take over for Larry Fitzgerald in the slot, most likely starting in 2019. So knowing that he's tied to Rosen, I just feel like he's the safest pick. In most dynasty leagues, they're PPR, and we know that Christian Kirk, if he fits into that Golden Tate type player role, he's going to rack up the receptions. So I just felt like he was the safest one to go with as my number 3.
I think he's safe. I think Michael Gallup is safer, though.
What do you think about this, Matt? Like, if you're sitting there in a dynasty, and let's say you have a balanced roster, you don't necessarily need production now. You also can, you feel balanced. Which of the 2 players would you prefer to be on your dynasty team, Michael Gallup or Christian Kirk?
I think Christian Kirk, just because for one, I thought he was a better prospect. That's no slight to Gallup. And I'll touch on Gallup in a second too, because he's another one that I really like and I think landed in a perfect spot. I'm with you, Tags, that I have a little bit of a reservation about the fact that they want to, use him not strictly as a slot receiver. But I mean, again, what are you going to do, man? Like, you have right. one of the best receivers ever to play the game currently operating as kind of like a 50-60% slot guy. So I do think that they can get looks where they have Fitzgerald in a slot on one side, and then on the other slot they have Christian Kirk. So I think that would be good for both players, and they can be creative too, because I think as long as you're kind of getting them each 40 to 60% out of their routes and targets out of the slot, I think it's tough. It's going to be tough to do, but I think that you can find ways to maximize the versatility there and give defenses something to think about. But I do think he's a great player, and he's going to land in instant opportunity. You're stealing right out of my notes there in terms of his player comparison, because Randall Cobb was exactly who I thought of, because not only do I think he's so great at getting open against zone coverage and being a reliable receiver, he's also really good on contested catches. That was something I noticed in his reception perception profile, because he's real rocked up, he's strong, and that was when Cobb was at his best. He was like a red zone threat because of that ability to win 50-50 balls for Aaron Rodgers. And Christian Kirk too, like, I know there's some questions to ask about him as a player, and people do that, and also this landing spot, like, is he going to be not maximized as a slot receiver? Let me tell you what, man, like, and maybe this is clouding my judgment a little, he's one of the guys I got to meet in the lead up to the draft and interview and talk to and like kind of go over, like, hey, you're the second best receiver against zone coverage in this class according to my charting, like, tell me what goes into that. I was just so impressed with him, like how professional and how dedicated he clearly is to being great. So he's somebody I don't want to bet against. So I'll just say that after talking to him.
So Tags, you've got Kirk as your number 3. Is Gallup right behind him, or is it somebody else?
Gallup's in that next tier. I have my the next group of receivers. There's like 4 of them that are like clustered together. So Courtland Sutton is someone that I can understand why people want to take a chance on, maybe even over Christian Kirk, because the ceiling is pretty massive with him. The concern is that he's now surrounded by a lot of talent there in Denver. Like, the wide receiver core is going to look completely different next year than it does this year. You're going to have Courtland Sutton, you're going to have Carlos Henderson, and then you're going to have Deshaun Hamilton. So I mean, Case Keenum,
and everyone's given up on Thomas and Sanders, but I mean, remember who they had throwing passes last year? I know Case Keenum's not like the answer or anything like that, but he's a lot better than what they had.
Oh, for sure. And that's the thing. But Courtland Sutton, he's another player. The reason that I would let him fall down draft boards is because he's not going to contribute in year 1. I can't see any situation where he does, unless something happens to Demaryius Thomas and then they'd be forced to start him. But he's someone whose value is going to drop off this offseason. I could see him like a Mike Williams type season where it's like, people are going to look at him.
Williams was hurt though.
Well,
I
know he was, but I'm talking about the production when he was on the field. It was very spotty. He didn't get very many targets, but I think eventually Courtland Sutton, I think he's learning. I know Matt had the comparison, I think, of Demaryius Thomas to Courtland Sutton, so that's a perfect landing spot for him.
Love it.
But I could also understand the cases for guys like James Washington and Anthony Miller. So James Washington, I'm going to touch on right now because I feel like he's someone that I would probably take in front of Courtland Sutton right now, and I would actually debate in front of Christian Kirk, and here's why. The team that he landed with on the Steelers, what he does well I think people have forgotten that Martavis Bryant was traded. And I say that because Darius Hayward-Bay would be starting in 3 wide receiver sets had they not drafted James Washington. And if you're worried about a rookie receiver coming into the Steelers office, don't be, because Martavis Bryant, when he was a rookie, he put up over 500 yards and 8 touchdowns his rookie season. You go to Juju Smith-Schuster last year as a rookie, worked his way into the lineup, and he finishes a top 20 wide receiver. Now, granted, he was extremely efficient, but the reason I like James Washington so much, Matt, you talked about it with Ridley, and the fact that James Washington's never going to see a number 1 cornerback because, well, Antonio Brown's in the field. Juju Smith-Schuster is still going to demand a ton of attention over the middle of the field. What James Washington does best is separate on the deep ball, and he tracks the ball better than anybody. Than a lot of NFL wide receivers. He tracks the ball better than Martavis Bryant. So when you add in James Washington with Ben Roethlisberger's arm, I feel like he's someone that can come in and make an impact right now.
Agree. Yep. And besides Ridley, I think Washington might be the most NFL ready of all these guys. I don't think it was the best landing spot, but you said it. I mean, I think it's a decent landing spot with Big Ben, all those other weapons around him to steal attention. And so I've actually got Washington as my number 4, behind Gallup at number 3. Washington's number 4, and Kirk is right behind him at 5. I think that's just a whole big tier, and I wouldn't blame you, and Courtland Sutton, I wouldn't blame you if you took any of those guys.
Yeah, Matt, so how do you feel about James Washington, and then let's talk about Anthony Miller and Courtland Sutton, your takes on those guys?
I love what you're saying about Washington, man. You know, that was a really good argument. I agree with so much of it. He was the best deep route runner in this class to me, at least of the guys that I looked up at near the top. You mentioned it. Great on the deep patterns, great contested catch receiver, had the highest contested catch conversion rate among the receivers I charted this year. Actually has the highest over the last 3 classes. Really, really good at that. So I do think he has those 2 traits where he can contribute right away on tight window targets and deep down the field. And that is something that they just kind of lost in Martavis Bryant. I do think there's a lot more opportunity available for that number 3 receiver right away than people are giving credit for. So I'm with you. I think that he's probably going to be underrated because people don't see the landing spot right away. And honestly, I think it's really good for Juju Smith-Schuster that he doesn't have to be like a full-time outside receiver now, because I think he is best in that Cooper Kupp type of role. Like I mentioned, him and Nelson Aguilar are guys that, they all are sort of these big slot receivers that I think they can really win in that way. It's good that he doesn't have to get out of that role, but I think Washington's going to bring something right away to the table that Juju does not, and that's great for the Steelers offense, but it does kind of make me question too, where they already have like a target hog there. How many footballers are really going to go around between those 2? And like I see people rank Juju as
and Le'Veon Bell,
right? And yeah, of course, right, Le'Veon Bell, of course. So it's like it's tough for me to kind of. I mean, we're overrating James Washington's year 1 impact. I do think there are reasons to question whether he might not translate right away based on the offense that he played and the fact he only ran routes from one side of the field. But if he does get on the field right away, I think that's going to ding Juju Smith-Schuster as the fact like people have him as like a top 20 fantasy receiver this year. That feels like it could, Washington could dig into that legitimately because he brings something that Juju does not.
Mm-hmm. I think Juju might be the single most overrated player outside of the obvious quarterbacks, Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, who have so many question marks and are going like, 2 and 3 among quarterbacks. But yeah, I'm not going to have any Juju shares. And in fact, in standard redraft leagues, I don't know if James Washington is really draftable in like a 10-teamer, maybe at the end of a 12-teamer. I think Gallup is draftable in either of them, and then obviously Moore and Ridley you could draft. But none of these guys are going to go super high in redraft leagues.
Well, that's my knock on Gallup, though. I question the competence of the Cowboys coaching staff.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's the thing. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I believe that Michael Gallup is the only player on that team who presents potential top 30 wide receiver potential. Like, Michael Gallup is someone that I actually really liked in college, and I felt like his quarterback situation wasn't great at Colorado State. He got open a lot more than people thought. Matt, we talked with so many people throughout the offseason, and Michael Gallup, it kept coming across as he's one of the smartest wide receivers. Once you put him like against a zone defense, he knows where to sit down in it. He's really smart when it comes to that. Now, he's a player that can come in and I think he can make a difference, and I think once he breaks into the starting lineup, Dak Prescott is going to know who his best receiver is. Like, Deontay Thompson, I'm not worried about him. Allen Hurns, he's a guy. I mean, let's be real about this, guys. Like, people are telling me that Allen Hurns is going to be a number 1 receiver in the NFL. Get out of here. And now, Matt.
What? He was like the number 4 for the Jags.
Matt, here's my question. I want to ask you this in the middle of this before I forget. if Chris Godwin was in this class of wide receivers, where would he rank among all these guys?
Oh, that's a great question. I know I've been asked this before too. Like if you combine the last two draft classes, I think Corey Davis would be the top among the top two guys. But Godwin, I think he's just as good as like a DJ Moore type of player or a Calvin Ridley. And I know I'm really high on Godwin, but I think he'd be right up there with those guys.
I agree.
That's fair.
But on Michael Gallup, I agree 100% with your analysis. I think that Dak Prescott gets a bad rap playing with the cast that he played with last year. I mean, Dez Bryant can't separate anymore. Like, no shock. Nobody's signed him yet. He scored below the 10th percentile in success rate versus man and press coverage last year in reception perception. He's cooked as an outside receiver, just can't play there anymore. And Michael Gallup, I compared him to like a Michael Crabtree, Michael Thomas type of player, like a poor man's version of those guys. I think he's along that same axis of wide receivers. So I think that's a much better stylistic fit with Dak Prescott. And hey, man, like, I agree. The competency of the Dallas coaching staff is always worth questioning. They might be stuck back in the 90s there with Gruden, but Jerry Jones said Michael Gallup's gonna have a week 1 role. Like he said that right after the draft, and like I hope he does. Like for once, I hope Jerry's right. But like that's embarrassing for the coaching staff for the owner / GM to just be like, yeah, he's gonna have a week 1 role. It's like, okay, well, what about competition? What about all this? So it's great, but hopefully that ends up being the case because I think he's a real good player and he's primed to have a big season if he gets on the field.
For sure.
Agree. I want to go back to what you guys were saying about Chris Godwin and how high you would have him. Let's say you're in a dynasty draft, okay? And you have the 8th or 9th pick. Somebody offers you Chris Godwin for that pick. Would you take it? Matt, you first.
I would have taken him in the back half of the first round last year. So, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a wide receiver, I think that's fair. I would rather have Chris Godwin than the pick. It's tough, but again, I'm a huge fan of his game, so I might be overrating him here, but I'll let the people decide that.
What do you think, Tags?
Well, it honestly depends on who's on the board right there. Like if it's Kerryon Johnson, I'd probably rather go with Chris Godwin. But if Calvin Ridley's still on the board, I'd take Ridley. If Royce Freeman's there, I'd probably take Royce Freeman. Nick Chubb would be like, that's like the borderline one where I'd probably go Chubb. It just depends on my team, right? If I needed a running back, I'll go Chubb. If I'm stacked at running back and I wouldn't be starting Chubb, then I'd probably take Godwin. So I think he'd fall right in that 7, 8, 9 range, just depending on who's on the board.
So we're going to get into the third tier here in just a moment, but first I want to talk about another one of the sponsors of today's show, Simple Contacts. My wife wears contact lens, and it's always like we just don't have enough time for that annual appointment to renew her prescription, so we just always kind of dread it. There's just so many things like that every year, and if you're in the same boat, you're going to love Simple Contacts because they make it super easy. It's a great new company that makes the annoying process very simple. Simple Contacts lets you renew your expired contact lens prescription and reorder your brand of lenses from your phone or computer in minutes. It really is that easy. Simple Contacts brings the doctor's office to wherever you are, whenever you need it. You can take the Simple Contacts vision test online in 5 minutes. A real doctor reviews it and renews your prescription. You save time, money, a headache. And if you have an unexpired prescription, just upload a photo of it or your doctor's info and order your lenses in minutes for a great price. They do all the hard work for you. This is vision care for the 21st century. Simple Contacts offers every brand of lenses and their prices are unbeatable. The vision test is just $20. Compare that to an annual appointment, which is like $250 without insurance. They have some of the best prices on contacts, shipping is free, and best of all, our listeners get $30 off their first Simple Contacts order. To save $30 on your lens, just go to simplecontacts.com/fantasypros or enter the code fantasypros at checkout. I want to mention that this isn't a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam. You still need to do those occasionally, but this is the most convenient way to renew a prescription and reorder your contacts if your vision still hasn't changed. Again, check out Simple Contacts and get $30 off by going to simplecontacts.com/fantasypros or just enter fantasypros at checkout. Give it a try. You're going to love it just as much as we did. All right, guys, this next tier here, at least for me, I know Tags wants Anthony Miller to be in the tier
He belongs
above,
in that tier.
And he's close.
He belongs in that tier.
He's close, but, I mean, Dante Pettis was drafted 44th overall, and you haven't even mentioned him. You think he's a special teamer? I guess some people would put DJ Chark in this tier. I wouldn't. To Traquan Smith, some people would put in this tier. I really think the tier is just Anthony Miller and Dante Pettis. Matt, how do you feel about it? Do you think that DJ Chark, Traquan Smith belongs in this tier?
DJ Chark, man, it's just a real bummer. Like, it's just a terrible landing spot. I think he's a good deep threat. I think he could have like a Mike Wallace career at best, really pop. But if you look at Wallace, like, he's just completely evaporated when in bad passing offenses. And I mean, Jacksonville's passing offense is both not great and crowded. So there's really nothing you can get excited about there.
Yeah.
Tre'Quan Smith, definitely somebody worth paying attention to, because the Saints, whenever they're interested in an offensive skill position, I think we should be interested in that offensive skill position.
Yeah.
He brings some vertical ability, and Ted Ginn, I don't think, is probably much longer for this roster. My boy Cam Meredith is there. I think they'll play two completely different roles. Meredith is also no guarantee to be healthy and be a regular contributor. So Tre'Quan Smith, I think you can push him up there. But I love Anthony Miller, man. I'm with Tags on this one. By the time this podcast is out, I probably will have already tweeted out the graphic comparing Doug Baldwin and Anthony Miller's route charts. That's the comparison that I gave for him pre-draft. I think it's really perfect, because not only are those guys both good, reliable slot receivers that run good routes, but they also win vertically, and they can win 50-50 balls too. And Anthony Miller was like an elite red zone receiver in college, because he can win those contested passes. So I really like Anthony Miller. I think he has a shot to be a great long-term, number 2 receiver or 1B receiver to Allen Robinson in Chicago. Just like everybody else, I'm super high on the Bears offense, and I think that he brings something that they did not have there, and they were aggressive about trading up to get him. So I'm with Tags. I love Anthony Miller. I think he's landed in a great spot, and he's also a really good receiver.
Do you think he plays as a rookie? I'm looking at the depth chart right now.
Mm-hmm.
Allen Robinson.
Don't mention Kevin
Say
White.
What you want about Kevin White? But he's there.
He is there. Physically, he is present. You're correct.
Anthony Miller as well. Is Anthony Miller the number 3, number 4, maybe number 2?
He's number 2.
I think he could easily be the number 2. I think he's going to translate really well. And I think their 3 wide receiver set is going to look like Allen Robinson is the X, and Taylor Gabriel, I think, will be the flanker, and that leaves Anthony Miller to be the slot receiver. And I think he's going to see a lot of high percentage passes there in an offense that should be up-tempo, spread concepts, really modern look, really use the Chiefs offense was great about putting their receivers in space and getting them into the open field. I think the Chicago Bears offense will do something very similar. So yeah, I love Miller. I think he could easily be the number 2 receiver there. You're right, Bobby. It is a little crowded there, not like in terms of there's a bunch of elite players, but you also got to consider Trey Burton is going to be like a hybrid slot receiver type move tight end guy. So they have that. They have Tariq Cohen, who I know they're going to want to keep involved. So, Anthony Miller's not a guy who's going to like walk into 100 targets this year probably. But if this is an offense that truly does take that, Rams-like next step, as I think a lot of people expect them to with Nagy there, then we're going to want, pieces of it. It's going to be like a Saints type of situation where it's like, okay, anytime they bring in a skill position player, we're interested. So they already have this guy in house. They clearly like him a lot. They traded up to get him. So yeah, I'm really excited about Miller.
Is it fair to say that we would compare him to like a Cooper Kupp with more upside?
Yes, I think he's a much better separator than Cooper Kupp is. Like, I think Anthony Miller could run routes from the outside. I do not think Cooper Kupp can really be like a consistent outside receiver. Miller,
he's so good at what he does, though.
Yeah, he's great at what he does. Yeah, no doubt about it. Like, I just finished charting him actually, and if he had gone to any other team, I would have really like wondered if he could have had that same amount of success, because you just watch how consistently Sean McVay finds ways to get him against zone coverage, again, using him in the middle of the field, using him as a slot receiver in this very specialized role that I think is becoming a really big norm in the NFL, and we should pay attention to as fantasy owners, because if you look at guys that play this role, this hybrid, bigger slot role, we're talking about guys like Juju, we're talking about guys like Cooper Kupp, Adam Thielen, again, Nelson Aguilar, and then at the higher end, we talk about Thielen, we talk about, Michael Thomas kind of does that, but not exclusively. Keenan Allen is one of those players. Like, these are players who are putting up big fantasy lines, and I think we should be paying attention to who those guys are going to end up being. And I think Miller definitely has a candidate to be that player from this year's draft class.
Man, Miller, when you said Adam Thielen, that's what I was thinking is Anthony Miller. It sounds like his upside could be someone like Adam Thielen. That's a quality fantasy wide receiver.
Maybe just a little bit, yeah. Those 90 catches could be nice.
Yeah, that would be nice. Now, Matt, real quick before we go on, sorry, I'm going to get to our next segment, but Dante Pettis, he's someone that I've been told that is more than what I thought. And I mean, I'm curious, like, you're someone that watches a lot of wide receivers. So Dante Pettis, where are you at on him? Obviously, I I didn't have him nearly as high as the 49ers did on my board, but they traded up to get him. They took him at the top of the second round, so they obviously like him a lot. But do we see him making any impact in year one? Like, I can't see a situation where they're taking Pierre Garçon.
It's the 49ers depth chart.
But Pierre Garçon, Marquise Goodwin, these two are under massive contracts, and Trent Taylor wasn't a bad player out of the slot last year, so I don't know why you're messing with the chemistry there. So Dante Pettis, to me, is a special teamer this year that might develop into a wide receiver once Pierre Garçon moves on. If Trent Taylor doesn't develop as much as they'd like him to, like, where are you at on Dante Pettis, Matt?
Yeah, Matt Waldman and I, who you brought up earlier, we did a podcast talking about how the differences between the way we evaluate receivers, and just honestly, it was kind of like a brain dump to everything I've learned about the position the last several years. And Dante Pettis we use as kind of like a jumping off point because he has Pettis as his number one receiver, really likes him. I was not as big of a fan. Reception perception was not that kind to him, and so we differed in our evaluation of the player. But we talked a lot more, and again, I think this is so much more important, and I think this is what reception perception is really great about doing is kind of deciding, like, where should these players be deployed. You mentioned the 49ers receivers. I'm with you. I don't think Goodwin or Garçon are about to get usurped. I think both of those guys are really good and really locked into these roles they have, but Shanahan has really moved from being, in his dad's offense, it was like there was a slot receiver and then one big X, and the big X just got a bunch of targets. That's not the way this offense operated last year. Obviously, they don't have a top-tier X receiver, but they were really great about maximizing specific roles for players. And I do think Pettis, why he appeals to them, is because I think this either goes one or two ways, and we'll know pretty quickly. Like, he could be a guy that can contribute at all three receiver spots. John Lynch actually said that on an interview on NFL Network. One of the reasons that Pettis was appealing to them is that he could play a little bit of X, he could play a little bit of flanker, and he could play a little bit of slot. I agree. I think he can kind of chip in at all those spots. What will be interesting is if he does overtake a Trent Taylor in the slot, then I think he does have a shot at being a really good player in year one, because I did not think Pettis was good against press coverage. I did not think he was good in tight contested situations, and I think if he moved much like I thought about the exact same way about a guy like Cooper Kupp and Juju Smith-Schuster, who I keep talking about, if Pettis finds his way into one of those type of roles in this offense that we all expect to be good, then I think we're excited about it. But he could easily, just as like you said, Trent Taylor, not give that role up because he was a pretty good player last year.
So, Matt, if you're on the clock, you need a wide receiver, and your top three options here are Pettis, DJ Chark, and Traquan Smith. Who are you taking?
Just, I don't know, quit. No, I think take
a different position. Yeah,
I think I would take. It's not like Chark is out of the picture to me. It would be between Pettis and Traquan Smith, and I think I would take Traquan Smith.
Me too. Tags, is that who you're taking?
I'd probably still go Pettis just because of draft capital where they took him and like the eventually working into a role. Even though I'm not a big fan of him, Traquan Smith was someone that like didn't impress me much in college. He landed in an awesome offense, and I feel like he's gonna have a few big games. I feel like he could end up being like a best ball target that has like a Brandon Coleman type season in year one, year two. But that's when Drew Brees' career kind of ends, and that's my concern. That's in the immediate future, and that's my concern with him. So I'd probably stick with Pettis, just hoping that he turns into something that maybe we didn't think he would.
I want to go back really quick to Anthony Miller, and Matt, you were hyping him up quite a bit, maybe even more so than Tags, which Tags has been swaying me a little bit on Anthony Miller, but this changed my mind quite a bit. I'm wondering, do you like Anthony Miller as much as like Courtland Sutton or Christian Kirk or even Michael Gallup?
I think I do. I think those guys all seem like they're around the same area to me. Courtland Sutton's an interesting one because path to immediate playing time is not there. I think, which I don't think is actually all that bad for him because he's a player that, like Tags mentioned, I compared to Demaryius Thomas, and what I mean by that is that I think he's going to need a little bit of seasoning. He's definitely very, very raw as a route runner. It wouldn't surprise me, honestly, at all. I know the common thought right now, or at least what I'm hearing from other analysts, is that they'll use him in 3 wide receiver sets, have Demaryius Thomas as the X, Courtland Sutton outside, and move Emmanuel Sanders into the slot. I mean, we haven't seen Sanders be a slot receiver in a long time, since his Pittsburgh days, really. So it could just as easily go to me. They keep Sanders and Thomas outside, and Deshaun Hamilton, 4th-round pick by the team, who I'm a huge fan of, and I think is really pro-ready to contribute right away because he's an awesome route runner and played almost exclusively as a slot receiver in college. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not projecting this, but I wouldn't be surprised if he actually ends up contributing more as a rookie than Courtland Sutton, just because I think he's much more ready to master an NFL route tree right now than Courtland Sutton is. But we could easily be having this conversation next year, and Sanders and Thomas, or at least one of the two, isn't on the team, and then Courtland Sutton's ready to, take on a much bigger role outside. So Sutton kind of feels like a guy who could be undervalued after this year, just if he starts slow, which I kind of expect him to. But yeah, Anthony Miller is right up there with guys like you mentioned, Michael Gallup. He's up there with those players to me for sure.
So you really like Deshaun Hamilton? Like, would you take him over DJ Chark?
Oh man, I feel stupid taking like a 4th round pick over a 2nd round pick in Dynasty, but I love Deshaun Hamilton. I think I would probably, like, those players always go undervalued to me, like the kind of run of the mill slot receivers or whatever. But he's another guy that I think could fit in that, because he's a bigger receiver too. I think he's an awesome guy. I think he's an awesome player. I would take, honestly, I even if it sounds stupid, I would take him 100% over DJ Chark. Honestly, I'd probably take him over, and again, probably dumb because of draft capital, but what do I care? I would probably take him over guys like Pettis. I would take him over guys like Traquan Smith.
Wow.
I really do believe in him, and I think that if he hits if he hits his ceiling, he's one of these safe high-end slot receivers like we've been talking about in that Adam Thielen, Keenan Allen, Juju, Cooper Kupp mold. I mean, at worst, I think he could be the player that Nelson Aguilar was last year. So, yeah, I really love Deshaun Hamilton. He's somebody that I do think went to a really good landing spot.
All right, so Bobby, before we move on to the sleeper portion, because we're going to get to our sleepers and stuff, I want to do a game that I've been doing with the experts that we've had on, talking about, if you're taking part in a dynasty startup draft this year. We talked a little bit about the startup process, last show. A lot of people have reached out to me, said that they loved us talking about startup dynasties, and maybe we'll do an episode talking more about that. But we're talking about these players, these rookies, and who we would take them over. So I'm going to give this question to both of you guys. I'm going to go through the names here, and kind of like a would you rather. Who would you rather have on your team? So Calvin Ridley, would you rather have Calvin Ridley or Marvin Jones or Demaryius Thomas on your dynasty squad if you're doing a startup today?
Demaryius Thomas.
I'm with Bobby on that one. I think of the three,
he's going to get 90 receptions. He always does. Last year he didn't, but he had the worst quarterbacks ever.
But are we confident that he's going to get another contract? Like Demaryius Thomas, they're going to cut him after this year. His salary's way too high. They don't have much of a cap hit at all by releasing him. I mean, even if he does go somewhere, Demaryius Thomas, this might be his last year of elite production, which is why I threw his name out there.
Yeah, I'm not super worried about it. Give me the production now. I'll figure it out later. We're hoping Calvin Ridley can be that someday.
Right.
Hoping.
Yeah. It just
what about Marvin Jones?
Jones is a tough one. I think we saw like exactly what happens over the last 2 years when you have a guy who is playing almost exclusively X receiver, but probably isn't a true X receiver, but is a really, really good football player in that like the year. I mean, both the like season end numbers look good the last 2 years, but of course I think most people remember the journey to get to those season long numbers in 2016 was not fun. So, I think that there's, he's a tough one for me. I probably want to take Calvin Ridley over Marvin Jones, but with clearly no conviction, as you can hear from the sound of my voice.
All three of those guys are so close tags. Those were a good three to throw.
That's what I'm saying. I want that to be the case every time. All right, next one. DJ Moore, Cooper Kupp, and Devontae Parker.
Oh my God, this one's really easy. I would go Moore, Kupp, Parker in that order.
Wow.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that one's really not very close from me either.
Wow, I would take Parker. I mean,
what?
I actually think
over Moore.
Hold on a second. I'm on board right now, and I'll say it. I don't care. I have never jumped on this hill because I've always been like a Parker. Okay, he could develop into a player. I think this is the year he actually breaks out, and I think everybody's jumping off a year too early. Jarvis Landry leaving. This defense is not very good. They kind of gave away players. There's not very good. They're going to be throwing the ball a ton, and when you look at the targets, they're not going to give a rookie tight end 80 targets. Mike Gesicki's not getting that. Albert Wilson, Danny Amendola, are these guys you're going to give 140 targets to? I think Devontae Parker's getting 120 targets this year, and then he's a free agent after the year.
Man.
He's a free agent next year, and he's a young receiver, 6'3", former first-round pick. When he's on the field and healthy, I think Devontae Parker has produced kind of like how he was supposed to. He's just never been healthy, so I would make the argument there. I think it's closer than you guys are saying, but I can understand why you'd say more.
Give me Kenny Stills over Parker this year in fantasy.
Oh,
me
that's
too.
gross.
Yep, there you go,
you
man.
Guys are,
that's right.
You guys are disgusting. All right, Christian Kirk.
Not the first time
Kirk.
anyone's ever told me that. That's fine.
Christian Kirk.
Wait, hold on. You know what's disgusting? You tweeted this out the other day, Matt, and we have to say something on our podcast because this is wrong. You don't put ketchup on tacos.
I didn't say it. Kerry Champion from ESPN
I
said
know.
it, so.
Whoever it was that said it, so
I
gross.
know, man.
I'm grossed
If
out.
you're listening to this podcast and you do that crap, knock it off.
I like Kerry too. I think she's really good on TV and very talented. But I was like, man, I've had some questionable food takes, but that was something I've never seen before. So, whoa,
oh man,
aggressive.
My God, yeah. Now I'm not hungry anymore, so that's always good. All right, Christian Kirk, Josh Doxson, and Marquise Goodwin.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Doxson, Kirk, Goodwin.
I think I'm in the same boat. Doxson's someone I feel like, is kind of like what Tags was saying with Devontae Parker. I feel like people are jumping off Doxson right now. The only difference is Doxson's actually good. Parker's not.
Well, Doxson had the hardest schedule of anyone. You talk about Dez Bryant. Doxson was covered by elite corners almost every game and was actually decent.
I don't know. I have not officially decided whether I'm in on Doxson this year or not, but I am still very, very much intrigued.
Yeah, Doxson to me, I just don't like the quarterback fit. I don't think Alex Smith is a quarterback that Josh Doxson's going to like very much. I think that Jamison Crowder's the one to buy there. So I was actually with you on this last year. I thought the Doxson was a great buy low, and it's not to say that he's going to fall off the face of the earth, but I just don't feel like he's ever going to be the elite receiver with Alex Smith. The next gen stats that Matt works with, talking about. He's just not. Alex Smith doesn't throw into tight windows. He doesn't do that. And Josh Doxson is not someone who generates a whole bunch of separation. As by looking at next gen stats, you can kind of see that. So, it really comes down. I would rather take Kirk than Josh Doxson at this point, especially in a PPR format. Marquise Goodwin is the flyer there. He's the one that it's like, man, I wish we could have. You want to like him more, but it's like with Pierre Garçon coming back, it's like how many targets per game is Marquise Goodwin going to get? So that's the issue there. So
let me just touch on the Doxson thing though. Like, for one, I think that the next gen stats, like separation metrics, I've tweeted about this before, I think, or I've written about it. I think it's more like it shows more like what type of targets the player gets more so than like the actual separation that they create. I don't think it really shows much about like a player quality or whatever, if that makes any sense. And like because that's the thing, like last year we pretty much we saw Doxson get the vast majority, I think over 40% of his targets did come when he had less than a yard of separation, but because he was mostly used as a jump ball receiver, and Kirk Cousins was really fearless about throwing him into those contested situations. And going back to TCU, he was dominant on contested catches. I mentioned James Washington up there. Like the contested catch conversion rates over the last three draft classes go James Washington, Chris Godwin, Josh Doxson. And Doxson, much like the rest of these guys, unlike the rest of those other guys, saw a ton of chances to win contested catches and still converted about 80 of them in his reception perception sample in college. But he was also really good at separating in college. I thought he was a guy that did create a ton of separation, with what he was asked to do at TCU. So I think he does have a more full field skill set. It's definitely worth questioning about Alex Smith. I just think if he takes his jump to hit his potential, he has more number one receiver ability than anybody that is on Washington's roster right now, or even that Alex Smith worked with in Kansas City at any point.
I would agree with that. Now, all right, so I got a couple more before we get into the sleepers. Courtland Sutton, Michael Crabtree, and Martavis Bryant.
Bryant is third easily to me in this discussion.
Yeah.
Who knows where he'll be next year? He's also like a sneeze away from a year-long suspension, or maybe longer than that. So it's Crabtree versus Sutton. I think I would say Sutton, but not convinced at all about that, because I think Crabtree's going to have a really good year this year, and if Lamar Jackson takes over, like I'm hoping and praying, I really would love that offense with Crabtree soaking up about 120 targets with Lamar Jackson there.
I just looked up my dynasty rankings. I just did them the other day, and I actually have Crabtree one spot higher than Sutton. So it's extremely close, but yeah, Crabtree for me.
Gotcha. All right. And now James Washington.
Well, what do you think? What do you think, Crabtree or Sutton?
It depends on my team build. If
Alex loves Martavis Bryant.
No,
that's his number
I know
one.
I'm taking the easy way out here. It depends on my team build because I feel like if I'm playing to win now, if I know I have a chance for a championship in 2018, I'll take Crabtree. If I'm building for the future, I'm going to take Sutton because Baltimore added so many pass catchers to their stable this offseason, and apparently they were still looking because they wanted to sign Dez Bryant to a contract, which he apparently turned down. I don't know what the story
That's
is
cheating,
there.
man. Dynasty startup, who are you taking?
In a dynasty startup, I would probably go with Sutton because I feel like I can get plenty of win now players later in the draft.
Okay.
Martavis Bryant is a wild card, and I know you guys like kind of put him as number 3, but I feel like if he lands in a right spot with a quarterback, and that's the thing, you have to weigh in the suspension because if he does get another failed drug test, he's basically out of a job. He's not getting brought on anywhere else. His career is over at that point. So yeah, I'd probably put him 3rd as well. But James Washington, Nelson Aguilar, and Will Fuller.
Ooh,
Washington by a ton, and then Fuller.
that's a good one. I think I would go Aguilar, Washington. No, Fuller, Washington. Those two are close. Those two are close. And I like Washington a lot, no doubt about it. But I think Aguilar is a good player. I think he's in a perfect role. They found a spot to solidify where he should be used. He's in he's attached to Carson Wentz. Hopefully, I mean, I think he could stay with the Eagles long term. I think this is his 5th year option this year, or at least it's getting close to the end of his rookie deal. So I really like Nelson Aguilar. I think he's a good player, and Will Fuller. Last year, obviously, he's going to regress in terms of touchdown per target. Like, no doubt about it. Like, you don't need anybody to tell you. You should not need an analyst to tell you that. So he'll obviously regress, but I do think he's going to be a big play threat in Deshaun Watson's offense, and there's really not a lot of players to take up targets there unless they sign Dez Bryant, and that still does remain like my favorite landing spot for Dez, but I tend to kind of doubt that's going to happen, but we'll see.
Aguilar was so good with Nick Foles, though. I'm not so sure he's going to be what he was at the end of the season when Wentz comes back.
He'd be all right. He'd be fine.
Stop it.
No,
Anyways,
I'm not saying like Foles is that much better or anything. I'm just saying he's
not
more
better
of
at all.
the type of wide receiver Aguilar throws to.
Well, no, I mean, Wentz had
Aguilar doesn't throw, by the way.
No,
Wentz
had some chemistry with Aguilar. It was a little hit or miss because of the receiving options there, and they do utilize their tight end an awful lot. So I think Aguilar, I mean, to me, it's James Washington, Aguilar, and Fuller. I'm not a Fuller fan, and actually, Matt, I would disagree. I think that Kiki QT is better than Will Fuller, and and it's not to say that the value is that Will Fuller's value isn't more in Dynasty because perception is reality, and people view Will Fuller as like a top 40 Dynasty wide receiver. I do not. I never was a huge Fuller fan. The touchdown regression is real. In the competition for targets, granted, they don't have a tight end that you're worried about, the running back position. There's like a lot of things that go with this team, but Kiki QT, Bruce Ellington playing the slot, like I don't know how they're going to operate those two, but I think QT is more of like a Tyreek Hill type player.
Yeah.
And whereas like Will Fuller was more of like a Deshaun Jackson, just not nearly as good.
Can't catch.
Kiki Cutie was going to be in my sleeper section, so I agree with you. I agree with you that he's definitely somebody that I think could take a major role in that offense, and he brings that same deep ball versatility. I'm not high on Fuller either. I don't get that confused. He's pretty much just a deep route runner, and that's it. But I do think that for fantasy, that like he can be a pretty clear week winner as long as he's attached to a good quarterback there in Watson.
All right, so I want to say this right now because I just got word from my producer and I wanted to share it with you guys because we're going to get into the sleepers here. We're going to name our sleepers at the wide receiver position. But I want to tell you guys, we now have a voicemail line for listeners to call in.
Ooh.
So you guys get to call in and yell at Bobby. You could tell him that he needs to stop skipping the show so that I have to take all the heat for him. You could tell him that you could ask him when his combine is going to take place because that's got to happen sometime. Anything you want. Ask us your questions, fantasy related, food related, whatever you want. Call in at 209-881-PROS, PROS. And that way we get to read, you get to hear your voice on air. We get to talk about it. It's going to provide another dimension to the show. And I'm looking forward to this. That's why I had to share it instead of waiting for our next podcast.
I love it, man. I'm glad you shared it. I'm excited about this.
Hell yes. And again, if you missed that number, 209-881-PROS.
All right, guys, let's go sleepers here now. And we already mentioned QT, and everyone, it seems, likes him. At least it's all the experts that have come on this show. I think Antonio Callaway is kind of an obvious one. He's just such a lottery ticket. He could be a top 4 wide receiver in this draft, or he could really never have much of a role in the NFL. So he's one that stands out to me. A lot of people like Equinemius St. Brown. I like Jamon Moore a lot more. I mean, the Packers drafted him 70 picks higher, right?
This reminds me of last year. Harmon, I know you remember this because this was like a big Twitter war about people and Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams and which one you prefer, which one you don't. And I came out and I said, it really doesn't matter what you guys think because the Packers told you they like Jamal Williams first, and that's why he got the first crack at the job. Now, Aaron Jones might be the better running back. That might be correct. Whereas like most people think that St. Brown is the better receiver. The Packers told you what you needed to know. Jamon Moore is going to get every opportunity to win that job over Equanimeous St. Brown. And the thing is Jamon Moore, he's on my sleeper list too. He's 6'3", 207, so it's not like St. Brown presents size that Moore doesn't. Moore's a solid size receiver. He added some weight for the combine. He looked good there. He wasn't really fast, but I mean, he's still considered raw. I don't think either of these players make an impact in year one, but Harmon, how do you feel about this in Dynasty? Because I love drafting wide receivers like Jamon Moore, like Equanimeous St. Brown, that are tied to elite, like greatest of all time quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers.
Totally. I think everybody should be interested in these guys for sure. Like, I'm not interested in the war between, like, I don't think it should be a war. But at the same time, like, it's a day 3 wide receiver. I think there's a chance that St. Brown could beat out Jamon Moore, but it's not a guarantee. I'm not about like just.
Well, he has to beat out Marquez.
Right,
Valdez,
yeah, he's the guy that he's the poor guy that like never
too.
gets mentioned because no fantasy analysts are like fans or whatever. So that's you could. I mean, you're 100% right. He could easily beat out both of these guys. So I think dynasty owners should be interested in any of these players. I did like St. Brown an awful lot after charting him for reception perception. I did not get a chance to look at Moore or the other guy, to Valdez Scantling. I shouldn't call him the other guy. It's very rude. But I mean, but tags, like, you're kind of right to bring up the running back situation. But I think you're kind of misremembering it, man, because like Aaron Jones did get ahead of Jamal Williams after Ty Montgomery got hurt against the Bears on Thursday night. Got in there, had a few starts, then he got hurt, and then they really saddled Jamal Williams with a ton of touches after that.
Well, Jamal Williams I'm going to go back and look because Williams he got hurt, and then Aaron Jones came in and stole the job,
and then he got hurt, and then Williams was the workhorse.
And Williams it was like a merry-go-round of running backs, and that's why I think when we look at like best ball ADP right now, I was looking at it. Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones are like legitimately 5 spots from one another, and nobody can decide which running back to take. I mean, it's nuts. I think taking both of them. No, it's definitely not Ty Montgomery. That's not happening. That ship has sailed. Wait, should we make this another combine bet?
Yes, but not about that. I'm not so sure I'm not so sure about that.
That's when you always know if a person's really like convicted about what they have to say. Yeah. As soon as it becomes
I like the other guys. I like Aaron Jones a lot. I was a big Aaron Jones truther. You'll remember. Yeah. I just think Ty Montgomery's being drafted way too late in best ball leagues.
That's fair. But let's get back on point. Matt, so you had Kiki QT on there as a sleeper. What other wide receivers do you like late enough in fantasy drafts that you might be able to stick on the end of your bench? And these are guys that are not going to produce right away, but these are guys that could potentially, if they do earn a spot on a team and they walk into a role because of an injury or whatnot, they might be bigger than you expected.
Yeah, Jordan Lasley, the other guy I was going to want to bring up. He got drafted by the Ravens. He's a second receiver they drafted. They took Jaleel Scott ahead of him. I had never heard of Jaleel Scott before.
I love Jaleel Scott.
Admit it. So I was not too familiar with him, but I was familiar with Lasley. I think he's a really talented player. I think that he has ability. He obviously I think he had some off the field issues at UCLA. Was suspended a little while. Had some issues in his game too. Like he's not a perfect receiver or whatever. But he's one of the guys that hasn't been mentioned that I do think has ability, and there's a chance to crack a rotation there in Baltimore. I'll mention Michael Crabtree really high on that signing. They signed 2 of my children in John Brown and Willie Snead. I love both of those players. I have for many years, but they're also not the picture of reliability for each of their own separate reasons. So there's a chance if one of those guys falls out of the rotation for injuries or what have you, then maybe somebody like Lasley cracks the rotation there in Baltimore. So he's someone that I think people should pay attention to.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned you hadn't watched Jaleel Scott. Yeah, he was out of a small school in New Mexico State, but I actually like Jaleel Scott. I talked about him, I think it was in the last podcast, we were talking about that, some like late picks that you could make in a rookie draft that might be a game changer. I don't think Jaleel Scott is going to walk in and play right away, but he's a very fluid athlete, and not many people that are 6'5", 218 pounds move the way he does. He runs a sub 540, 4.540, so I do like him. The Ravens obviously liked him even more than I thought they would because he got drafted in the 4th round, but my other sleeper instead of Jaleel Scott would be Deon Cain. I mentioned about Jamon Moore and ESB and the fact that I like, tying my wide receivers that are deep on my bench to elite quarterbacks. That's why Geronimo Allison's on all of my dynasty rosters, because I always want to tie it to the next guy up in that Packers offense. So if Andrew Luck should return to the quarterback that he once was, I think Deon Cain is a player who could walk into the role that Dante Moncrief was kind of filling with him as that possession style receiver, but Deon Cain was more of a possession-style receiver in college, where it's like he's used to that volume. T.Y. Hilton's not that guy. He's the field stretcher that plays out of the slot. So I know that Darius Fountain was drafted in front of Deon Cain, but I was a bigger fan of Cain's skill set. And I think that these two were so late in the draft, I think 5th and 6th round, that there would be a competition between those two at wide receiver. And I mean, it's Ryan
Cain's
Grant.
Cain's going to win.
It's Ryan.
He's really good for a 6th round pick. He has a lot of upside.
Yeah, and he's competing with Ryan Grant, and that's it. Like Chester Rogers. I mean, who are the Colts trotting out there? I was shocked they didn't use one of their 3 second-round picks on a wide receiver, but they didn't. And Deon Cain was someone that some analysts had as the top 10 wide receiver in this class.
I did. I like Deon Cain a lot. I love the offensive fit. I would consider him. Obviously, I would have to take DJ Chark a lot higher if I wanted him. But in terms of my rankings, DJ Chark and Deon Cain are right next to each other. I think this is a great fit, a better fit for Cain, and he might be the better football player.
Yeah, Matt, did you watch anything on Cain?
I mean, I'd seen a little bit here and there, and I was kind of whatever on him. I'm not really excited about either one of those two, as individual players. But I mean, if one of them does win a competition there, you're right, Tags. There's a ton of opportunity to take in the Indianapolis passing game.
Now, guys, I've got 2 more names that I absolutely love. And Mike, you're not actually allowed to listen to this because we have a dynasty draft coming up next week. And if you take these guys, I'm going to body slam you on film. All right?
Oh, let's hear it.
Number 1 is Braxton Berrios. Again, it's with Tom Brady, the guys that he likes to pass to, the Julian Edelmans, the Danny Amendolas, all those guys. Braxton Berrios is the next one of those guys. I don't know if he has as much skill as those guys, but he's going to get his crack eventually. Injuries do happen, and I think he could really take off. And then the other name, this is someone that nobody is really talking about, and I absolutely love him. I'm definitely getting Stacie Koli for the Minnesota Vikings. If he didn't have off-the-field issues and really on-the-field attitude problems, he just doesn't really try that hard. I think he would have been drafted in the 3rd round, maybe 4th round. He's got plenty of talent. You look at this Vikings depth chart, and it is very ugly. He's got a chance to be the number 3 guy there. I know Treadwell's got the upper hand, but Koli has a chance to get some serious targets. Cousins throws the ball all over the field to everyone, and Koli's going to have an opportunity if he makes the roster.
I actually like Corey Robinson better than Koli. I had Corey Robinson in my top. He's my number 50 rookie prospect, so I would disagree on that one. I think Corey Robertson's better. But again, I still think it's Laquan Treadwell's job. And if he doesn't do it this year, they still have Kendall Wright on the roster too, because they signed him this offseason. So it's really ugly. I don't see a path to many targets for him this year. That's more of like stick him on your bench and like hope that Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen kind of just go away.
I seem to remember you said something similar about someone named Keelan Cole last year, and you laughed at me.
So I will give Bobby credit. Bobby did mention him before, at the start of preseason. Bobby's like, Keelan Cole's a name. I'm like, I haven't even watched this call.
I said he's the next Stephon Diggs, and their stats were like identical. That was maybe the best take I've ever had.
I would think about retiring after that one. I would think about that one. Man, that is walk-off worthy because, Keelan Cole, he's good. He's unfortunately in this crowded, bad Jacksonville passing offense, but he's a good player, and that's a good call.
And is there anybody else that you wanted to mention, Matt, before we get out of here?
Nah, that's pretty much it for rookies for me. I mean, we kind of hit on all the guys I have interest in, beyond the super late guys that, that's about it for me.
This was a lot of fun, guys. I'm glad I came back for this show, and very glad that I skipped out on the one with my arch nemesis, Andy Behrens.
I'll make sure I let Andy know.
All right, Matt, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. This was a ton of fun. I really appreciate it.
And remember, you can find Matt on Twitter at MattHarmon_BYB. Mike is at Mike Tagliere NFL, and I'm at Bobby Fantasy Pro. Thanks again to the sponsors of today's show, PristineAuction.com. That's PRISTINE. They're giving away a signed Todd Gurley jersey to one of our listeners. Rate and review us on iTunes. Take a screenshot. Send it to us at contest@fantasypros.com. And thanks again to Simple Contacts. They have some of the best prices on contacts. Shipping is free. To save $30 on your lens, just go to simplecontacts.com/fantasypros or enter the code fantasypros at checkout. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening, and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.